Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is that podcast where we talk about things like freedom, liberty, living an international lifestyle, and putting past all of those things that get in your way of doing that. My name is Jonathan Lockwood. I'm here with James Guzman. Hey, James.
Hey, John. How's it going?
James just got back, a couple of days ago. Where were you?
I was in Michoacan. There's a couple cities over there, Pátzcuaro and Morelia. So, yeah, it was pretty good. They got some really beautiful mountains there. And Pátzcuaro is kind of a small colonial town. Pátzcuaro, yeah.
Okay, funny name. And Morelia.
Yeah, it's about 2.5 hours away. So.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Well, everything's going great here in San Miguel. Looking forward to a great weekend. It's going to be my birthday.
And happy birthday.
So Cecilia and I are going to Querétaro. And we're going to spend, we're actually going to stay, we've gone there a few times, and we stay at a nice hotel outside of the downtown area. But this time, we're staying at a cool place there. We'll just maybe walk or maybe take cabs there.
And just hang out in the centro?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be a good time.
Yeah. All right. So our guest today on the Borderless Podcast is Kevin Koskella. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you are.
Koskella. All right. Very good. Ever since he turned his love for competitive swimming into a profitable business in 2003, he has been excited about earning income online and maximizing freedom levels. Today, he's committed to helping others do the same with their life passions. By harnessing the power of online marketing, he works with idea-driven people to develop membership websites, ebooks, and other high-value niche marketing sites that generate income and thought leadership. Leading by example, Kevin provides expertise and guidance to those wanting to break free from the 9-to-5 office culture and pursue the life they want to be living, building freedom in an unfree world. By the way, I should mention he is the host of the Freedom Lovin Podcast, and I love this podcast. Welcome, Kevin Koskella.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
So you are originally from, where is it?
Well, I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've been living mostly in San Diego, or I should say staying mostly in San Diego for the last 10, 11 years. But I've lived in a variety of other places as well.
Why don't you tell us what the point is of the Freedom Lovin Podcast so people with the Borderless Podcast understand why we have you on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been obsessed with freedom for a really long time, and I'm not really sure why, but I used to work in a corporate environment, and I did that for many years and really just never got my footing in corporate life and cubicle life and all that. I just always felt like this can't be all there is. There's got to be more. And I just wanted to get out and do my own thing. And I never knew what that was. And I always thought, well, I just need a few more years in the corporate world and then I'll be ready to go. And that just never really happened. So I finally got laid off. And that was kind of the thing that I was reading the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books at that time. And I totally got it. It just clicked. And I'm like, I got to do my own thing. So that's kind of what led me to starting my own business. And the first couple of tries were really failures. And I lost money, and I didn't know how to manage people or a business. But they were learning experiences. And then I kind of stumbled into online marketing, which to me provides way more freedom than most businesses do. So that's where I ended up, and I created my own products based on some of the knowledge I had with my competitive swimming background, and that was really fun. And I was able to create a book and videos and DVDs and things like that. And so I kind of just made a business out of it, and I've been doing online marketing ever since. And along those lines, also just politically and personally, I kind of went through cycles of feeling not so free, and then understanding more and having some experiences that led me to really seeing that you have to create freedom, your own freedom, which is kind of where I came up with my tagline, which is the building freedom in an unfree world, which is also taken from Harry Brown's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, which is where I learned just a ton about this kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, so it seems like you've had a lot of time to think about this type of stuff. What definition do you give to freedom?
The definition I think I would go with is not having any unchosen obligations. So everything that I do that's what I want to do, and that doesn't mean that there are things that maybe within my business that need to be done that I don't necessarily get a thrill out of, but just that it's going towards a goal that I have. So
yeah. Well, that's good. And it sounds like, you've been able to do that with some of the things that you've done. You started off just kind of giving, swimming instruction manuals, this type of stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, it started with just some workouts because I was actually at the time I was doing actual live coaching where I was coaching groups, and a lot of people were asking me about if they could do private lessons. So then I decided to do lessons on the side, and that led me to I found that most of these people that I were coaching were older than 18, so adult swim lessons. There were just not that many people at that time giving adult swim lessons. So I was like, I could make a lot of money doing adult lessons. And then people that came to me were mostly they were wanting to do a triathlon, which is swim, bike, run event. And so then I kind of looked online, and I didn't see anybody doing giving people that specifically triathletes swimming help. So I just created tryswimcoach.com. And then we just, kind of started slowly with just giving them workouts. And I was selling a set of workouts for $15. And I just, the first few sales was where I really got the bug, where I was like, oh, this can actually work. I can sell something online. So that was kind of what started me off. And then I just grew it from there.
Okay. So you grew it from there, and then you got into some other types of products, correct?
Yeah, I mean, most of my focus has been on that site, and because it's a pretty, even though it's kind of a small niche, worldwide, it's a pretty good amount of people. So I can just continue growing it. There's always new people in the sport. So I started with just an ebook. I created an ebook, and then went from there to created a DVD. And when DVDs were more hot, we were selling a lot of those, and then created a couple of years ago a membership site. So that's where people pay to join, and then they get several modules, they get videos, they get workouts, and then they get more attention from me and my assistant. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, I listened to, I think, your first 3 podcasts. Now, and you've been doing this for 2 years now, correct? The podcast.
The Freedom Lovin?
Yes.
Yeah. I started the Freedom Lovin Podcast about 2 years ago. And it started, actually, the site I started as just a travel blog because I just love traveling and wanted to just kind of record my experiences and kind of just for me. And I think it was me and my parents were the only people that were actually reading the blog for a while. And but then I just started kind of adding different things to the blog, and I like the podcasting thing. I did another podcast for my swimming site, and I kind of understood it, and I thought, why not just do a podcast? Even if it's just me talking, it'd be kind of fun. So then I started that, and it started with the idea that there's the philosophy part of freedom, and then there's the actual practical elements like the entrepreneurship. And I wanted to combine those two things and talk about travel and sort of what you guys are all about, the borderless lifestyle. I really want to promote that and get people thinking about different ways to live as opposed to just, living the 9 to 5 and staying in one place your whole life.
Yeah. So when you first started out with the, making a living with these swimming information products, was there a course that you took or a book that you had that kind of taught you the ropes as far as, getting to know how to get started on something like that?
There was a couple of books that I read. I mean, I mentioned The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I think that's a good one for mindset. And I think most people have read that. I feel like almost everybody's read that book, or at least, a couple of the books in the series. And that's kind of the mindset. I mean, that's not going to give you everything you need to know, but the mindset. I read a book. There was a book called Multiple Streams of Income. I think it was Robert Allen. Yeah. And that was a really great beginning of looking at all the different things he could do. And then he wrote another one called Multiple Streams of Internet Income. This is back in like 2001. Mm-hmm. And so this is when nobody was doing, hardly anybody was doing business online. And so I read that book, and I was like, that gave me the confidence to go forward. I was like, he can do this thing. And he did this project. It was like a 1 year long project. And his goal was to make $20,000. That was his whole goal. And he just kind of like talks about every step of the way through the book. And at the end, he basically sends one email and he makes like $20,000. Mm. It's like all at once. Yeah. And I thought that was just super inspiring. And then, and then I started just kind of researching everything myself and trying to put things together and making like a few bucks and not knowing what I was doing exactly. And then I went to a seminar, and it was a company that no longer, I don't think they exist anymore. It was Internet Marketing Center, which was one of the original internet marketing businesses that were teaching other people how to do this. And what inspired me the most was all their examples of people that had done their course and what they were doing now. So instead of them highlighting all these people that were making millions of dollars, it was like all across the board. Like one person was making like $4,000 a month selling like some little thing. And it was just like, wow, that's amazing. And there was a guy on there that his story was he grew up in Compton and nobody around him was even remotely thinking about starting a business. And he got involved in, he was a musician, and he figured out how to teach people how to play piano online. And then he just designed a little thing like to do this. And then he started selling it on his he built a website. It was just one thing after another. And at the time he was like 20 years old, and he was making, it was something like $400,000 in the last year, just from this one thing. Yeah. So I was just like, this is crazy. I got to do this. I was just super inspired. And then I built my first site, and I kind of went from there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, about how long did it take, once you said, okay, I'm going to do this, and you started building the site, until you started making money, and then until you were sustainable with that, you could sustain yourself with that income?
At first I was making money right away because I had these. I built a site. I mean, after I built the site, I just had this one little thing that I sold. It was basically like a PDF file with workouts, and I put that up, and I just had a little PayPal button, and it completely didn't work. Like the first order that came in, I was actually traveling in Europe, and I hadn't checked my email in like 2 days, and the first order, the guy paid, and he didn't get the document. And so he was like furious, and he was sending me all these emails. But then after that, I figured out, all that stuff. And so right away I was making money, but it wasn't very much. And then maybe a couple months later, I was starting to bring in, because I created the ebook, and then I started learning how to do some sales copy and things like that. And then it started picking up, but it wasn't for maybe 2 more years before I could say, okay, no more other work. I'm going to focus on internet marketing.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of years took. All right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that say that, information products, it's kind of a saturated industry, and there's a lot of people doing it in every little niche. What do you think about that? Do you think that maybe the boat is kind of sailed on as far as information products?
No, I don't think so, because I think there's always it doesn't matter in most niches how many people there are. It's just presenting it in a unique way. Everybody's going to have people that follow them versus other people. Like we were talking about a particular podcast that we've all heard, business podcasts, and maybe I won't name it, but that we all don't really like it, but yet it's one of the top business podcasts out there. Mm-hmm. And so obviously there's certain people that are going to follow. They're going to gravitate towards certain personalities, certain ways of presenting information. And so if there's a lot of people in one niche, it doesn't necessarily mean that niche is already taken and there's too many people and you can't do anything with it. There's actually, sometimes it means that there's room for, if there's a lot of people doing it, that could mean that it's popular. There's room for plenty more. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential still.
Yeah. I need to read this book. Your first 3 podcasts, you delve rather deeply into Harry Browne, and it's clear that he had quite an impact on you. And yeah. I've still not read it. James has brought this book up many times. In fact, our mutual friend, local business owner here, Philip, read it recently, and it had a profound impact upon him. And all I know is that I love that I love that quote of his. Government is good at one thing. It breaks your legs, hands you a crutch, and says, "See, without government, you wouldn't be able to walk." I always loved that quote, But what was it? At what age did you read that book, and how did it affect you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Jonathan, so your story that I listened to on your podcast where you talked about your story, I could relate to a lot of it. And it was actually, for me, my age was 37 when I started to finally kind of learn all this stuff. And so you're not the only one that late in life kind of came to some awakenings. But yeah, that book is influenced by Ayn Rand. So you were talking about you were influenced by Ayn Rand and just kind of the concept of she has the virtue of selfishness and how if everybody were selfless, the world would just kind of collapse. It just wouldn't work. Right. And that's Harry Browne takes that concept and runs with it. And so I basically just started becoming interested. I was actually involved in a political campaign back in 2008, and I was a kind of a hardcore libertarian. And as soon as Ron Paul said he was going to run for president, I was like, okay, this is going to be my entire life right now. This is everything. And so I really thought that was how the world was going to change through this message that he was going to deliver. And so, the whole thing, it went through a cycle where I was donating money, I was volunteering for everything I could. And then I got to a point where I was reading a ton of books and I was talking to a lot of people that I was kind of doing the campaigning stuff with. And I discovered something called anarcho-capitalism. I'd never heard of it before. And so I was like, what is this? I don't get it. So I started reading it. I listened to a couple of books on it. And I was like, okay, I think this is actually more where that's more my mindset. And then, I just started thinking that maybe elections aren't the best thing in the world and maybe we don't need to do any politics. And so by the time the primary elections came around, like in 2008, I was done with politics mentally, and I went and voted because I was like, I put in all this time. I'm just going to go to the voting booth and check the box. And then I walked out of that booth, and I was like, never again. I feel horrible about the whole thing. And and then I started listening to a podcast called Freedom Lovin Radio, which is Stefan Molyneux. Right. And that's basically kind of the theory behind libertarianism, the theory behind just freedom, and he took it to a personal level, and that's what really grabbed me. And I was like, this isn't just like, oh, I want to change the world. It's more. There's all kinds of things that I've never looked into myself. And so then, I'd been meaning to read that book, the Harry Browne book, and I was looking on Amazon, and the copies were going for like a couple $100s. I kept waiting to see if it dropped, and then finally I found a copy, I think for like $20, and I bought it. And so it was just this time I was going through all this like kind of introspection and trying to figure out what my beliefs were, and I read that book, and I just sat there and I could not put it down. I read it super fast because it was so captivating. And it's just the idea that you don't have to live your life any certain way. It's sort of like you can set your own way of doing things. And he gives you a prescription of like how to deal with all these things in society that are going to try to hold you back, and all the different people that are going to try to influence you one way or another. And I just felt so much freer after I read the book than I did before. And so I read it again, and then I just started kind of like trying to live my life that way after that.
That's great. And then you started a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, fantastic. Yeah. I've got to check that out. Do they not have any digital copies of that? Can I get a Kindle? They do. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's the thing, is now it's available PDF. And I think since he passed away a few years ago, I think his wife is selling the PDFs for like $10. So, and you can get them for free, out there online. You can get them for free all over. But it's worth, it's definitely worth it.
I see. Very good. Well, we're going to take just a break here to give some attention to our sponsor. But when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you've learned as you've done this podcast, because that's what I think, at the beginning of this Borderless Podcast, I wasn't really sure how it was going to roll out. But one of the beautiful things about it is not only in your attempt to help other people? Are you helping other people perhaps? But you're helping yourself, and you're learning a lot along the way and meeting some cool people. So let's talk about how that's rolled out for you. And we also want to talk about this New Mexico LLC that you talk about on your website. But right now, today's Borderless Podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, your online leader in promoting moral superiority. You know, I was going to you do one of their ads here, but I got a strange phone call last night in the middle of the night, and it was the head guy at the Condescending Group called my cell phone, and I picked it up, and he was breathing really hard, and then he hung up, and I don't know what the hell was that? Thanks a lot for waking me up. Maybe it was a mistake. No. So you go to their website, thecondescendinggroup.com, and the front page has got this on it. It says, "Last night, condescending friends, I had a horrifying nightmare. When I woke up, it struck me that the entire foundation upon which we built the Condescending Group, one of comforting emotionalism and incessant whining, one of exalting each other by pooping on others, wasn't fair to people, nor did it make any sense. It was the most shocking moment of my life. I awakened to completely soaked sheets, and although some of that was because I did pee the bed, more of it was from sweat, as I realized that none of what we do is based upon facts or logic. I don't know what to do, and am presently very suicidal. If any of you can please send me a text or email with some kind of help, a thought, a chant, a yoga pose, anything. I'm desperate. Please lead me back to the land of condescending wonder. I'll do anything." So, what do you think of that?
I don't know. That sounds like maybe he picked up the how to live free in an unfree world.
I've always been worried. Yeah. Well, one can only hope, but it's a nightmare. It was like something came to him in the middle of the night. Anyway, I'm worried about this guy, and so please reach out to him, see if you can help him out. We want to make sure that he's safe. Okay. So we are back to the Borderless Podcast. Our guest today is Kevin Koskella. He is the host of the Freedom Lovin Podcast. He's an entrepreneur, online marketer, and he likes to help people who want to break free from the 9-to-5 office culture and pursue the life that they want to be living, building freedom in an unfree world. So let's talk about this podcast itself. How many episodes are out there so far, Kevin?
I think I just did my 65th.
Okay. And what would you say, what have you learned through the process of interviewing people and having them on your show?
Well, one thing I've learned is that there are a lot of people out there that crave freedom. So it's a lot more than I ever thought. And one thing that's cool is that there's so many different aspects to freedom, and philosophy is just one of many things that go along with being free. And so I started off the podcast. The first episode is all about philosophy, and the first couple episodes, and then I go from there. And then it's just the practical elements that go into it are so interesting. And I've done some podcasts, like I did one on minimalism, and that whole concept is so interesting. And yeah, I think it's just seeing all the people out there that want to do this is really inspiring. And just getting the emails, like I get emails from people that tell me what they're doing, and maybe they have questions, or maybe they just want to chat about it. Hearing that is just awesome. I think that's really why I keep doing it, is just hearing from people and getting to know like what else is going on out there. And I think that also ties in with your borderless concept is that it doesn't matter like where you live. I mean, this is something that you can do no matter where you are. I mean, that may be a little bit of an exaggeration, because you could be in a place where maybe there's no internet or there's no clean water or something like that. But it's one of those things where I just really love hearing about people's story from wherever they are. It's
a great tool for networking, isn't it? I mean, it gives me an excuse to contact people that maybe I otherwise wouldn't have an excuse to contact and have an hour-long conversation with them,
Yeah, how can you call up Pete Cisco,
right?
And just say, hey, how you doing? You get to say, hey, I got a podcast. Will you be on?
Yeah, absolutely. And we get to,
exactly. Yeah, it does. It's a tool to contact, to get in touch with people that you really couldn't otherwise. And there's some people still on my list that I've tried to get a hold of, like James Altucher. It's just, He's the guy I love reading his stuff. I think it's pronounced
Altucher.
Altucher. I listen to his podcast every day. I've listened to there's maybe about 9 or 10 of them I haven't listened to. I listen to his Ask Altucher. James doesn't like that as much, but I like it.
Ice-T said it's pronounced Altucher.
What'd you say?
I'll touch her. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, his stuff goes right along with what we're talking about, and I've reached out to him a few times. He read one of my questions on his podcast once, but he didn't respond and come on mine. So we'll see.
Yeah, I see. Very good. All right. Well, okay. So you've had a lot of guests. I noticed. I didn't look at all of them. You had Fergus Hodgson of Pan Am Post, interesting guy. We've had him on too. You had Pete Sisko on, really interesting guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who else have you had on that we might be aware of?
Let's see.
You had Andrew Henderson on there as well.
And we're writing these down so we can immediately contact them. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've kind of tried to do, like I said, like philosophy and then entrepreneurship. You know, I had Dan Andrews on one of the shows. I had Jeff Berwick on. I know you guys, James used to work for him. And then, wow, let's see, who else?
He had Andrew Henderson on. He was on our podcast as well.
Yeah, Andrew Henderson. And then my friend Wes Bertrand, who does Complete Liberty podcast, and who he kind of helped me come out of the matrix at that time. Cool. And then let's see, Jeremy Franzen's been on a couple times. He does the Internet Business Mastery podcast. And
I saw you had one on relationships or something like that, like sexuality in the new millennium.
Sex with, and then there's a girl's name.
Yeah. So
Sex 3.0. Yeah, I had JJ Roberts on. That's actually a guy.
Oh,
but
never mind that.
No, it's an interesting, that whole concept is really interesting to me because, you know, right around the same time that we were talking about reading all these books and, you know, how I found freedom and all that, I was actually going through a divorce. And that was, to me, like, Jonathan, you're coming out of your religious cult. Not exactly the same, but it was kind of similar because I had to really think about relationships a lot at that same time too. And what does it mean? And Harry Brown has a chapter on non-marriage, and it's a really interesting concept that I really like. I mean, it's to me it makes relationships better rather than taking something away from them. Right. And, you know, the idea of instead of being actually legally married, to actually have something that's called a non-marriage, where it's basically the same thing, only you decide your own contract instead of the government deciding who gets what and who's doing what. So, but yeah, anyway, JJ Roberts, that was Sex 3.0 it's the same kind of thing. It's like personal choice versus just going along with what society says. So it's you know, saying, okay, we're in this relationship. What are we? What are we doing here? Like, are we going to just, you know, decide that that we're going to put rings on our fingers and sign contracts because everybody else is doing that and that's just what you do? Or do we want to actually think about this and say, okay, what type of relationship do we want?
Right. Interesting. Very good. Well, it looks like you've had you say 65 podcasts so far, so no doubt it's been very enriching for you and the people who listen to the Freedom Lovin Podcast. There's something that you've talked about quite a bit, and I notice it sort of front and center on your website. It's a New Mexico LLC, which you're saying is completely anonymous and has a lot of advantages. Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely, yeah. And that was the other person I had on my podcast was my friend Steve Michaels, who his website is keepyourassets.net, and he's the one that introduced me to the New Mexico LLC, and it's a way to do business anonymously. It's a legal way to do business anonymously. So, Jonathan, you mentioned that you want to do everything, you know, kind of above board and legally, and because you obviously don't want to be caught doing something and thrown in a cage.
Yeah. Sounds real freaking familiar.
Yeah. So I really like the New Mexico LLC as far as the anonymity. So in New Mexico, you can register a business as an LLC, and you do not have to put your name on any of the company documents. There's no requirement in New Mexico for that. So it's not very well known, and for some reason, when I talk to people about this, they seem to just instantly think there must be something illegal about it. If you do this, you're going to be thrown in jail. There's no way it could be possibly true. But if you look at Steve's site has some information on this, but if you look at the IRS rules and the New Mexico rules, everything, it's totally legal, and it's you basically just sign up for an LLC, you name it whatever you want to name it, and you can just do business with that LLC. And there's no yearly fee either. Like a lot of the states, they make you pay every year. You have to pay something, and you have to file some sort of documents showing that you're still a business. But this one, it's just a one-time fee. So it's a really nice way to do business. And you can kind of think of like, if you just put your mind to it, you can think of how would doing business anonymously help you?
Well, help us out here. Well, let's break it down. I mean, I understand it's anonymous. You don't have to put your name on it. That does surprise me. I don't understand it. But how does that end up? What advantages does that give you?
Well, okay. So if you're doing business online, you're technically not. You don't have a storefront. You don't have a location. So I would call myself a PT. Even though I spend a lot of my time in San Diego, I'm a permanent traveler, or like some people might say, a perpetual tourist, or a prior taxpayer. Right. So that's that's kind of a one type of business that you really, being a location independent, and then being anonymous is a really great combination, because like, let's say that you live in high tax state. Let's say you live in New York, and you have an online business. Well, why does the state of New York, have any claim to the income that you're making with your online business? Okay. So you can kind of see where so this kind of thing would really help somebody that's an internet entrepreneur. Okay. In addition, just being able to do business online, you're not going to, like, anyone that wants to get at your money, they're going to have a really hard time doing so. If let's say somebody wants to sue you, it's going to take them, I imagine that there's some possible way they could with being anonymous, but it's going to take a lot of digging just to find out who owns this business, because New Mexico is not going to tell them. They're not going to go be able to find you in some database. So
I see. Okay. Well, I can see the advantages of that then. Now, so you call yourself a permanent traveler, a perpetual tourist. What are some places that you've been since you decided to be such?
Yeah. So I've actually done a few different things. I've kind of done the overseas thing. I spent some time over in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Bali, Cambodia, over in Vietnam, all these areas. And then I've also done some things like within the U.S. Like I've spent some time in Austin, Texas, spent obviously a lot of time in San Diego, Boulder, Colorado. So, and then I spent my first venture out actually I was kind of scared at that time to do anything big. So I decided to go to an English speaking country that was far away, and that was Australia. And I thought that I'd be able to save money, but it was actually completely the opposite, because Australia is really expensive, and ended up spending a lot more money than I would have in the U.S. But since then, I've been able to figure out how to travel and save money at the same time, which is, I think, an advantage of having a business that you can bring anywhere, is that you don't have to pay the high rents, necessarily.
Yeah. So what are some of the tips that you've used to save money on the road?
Well, one thing is, if you do a longer kind of stay somewhere, like let's say you're going somewhere for 3 months, you can move out of whatever place you're staying. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in San Diego. So, but if I were going to go somewhere, like I went to Southeast Asia and take off for a few months, I'm going to move out of my apartment. I'm going to sell my car. I'm going to get rid of all my bills, basically. And then my cost of living just plummets. And then even like in places like Southeast Asia, the hotels there are a lot cheaper than paying rent in a nice area in San Diego. So I was able to travel around. I did all my expenses and everything, and I had it on my blog where it's like I actually saved, like, the first month just traveling from place to place to place. I saved like $600-$700, and that's with going out to dinner every night, and all that. So
yeah. All right. I usually do the Airbnb thing, and I find that if you go there, so if you, like, I don't know, book a few days or something like that, and then if you go there and meet the owner, you can then negotiate If you like the place, you can negotiate a longer stay. And, there's all kinds of different things that you can do. You can offer your services. Maybe they need help with some online services or something like that. I wrote a blog post a while ago. It was how to get paid to live in paradise, something like that. I'll put it in the notes. But there's all these different strategies that you can use to save money while you're traveling the world and working.
And I've often also along the lines of Airbnb is like when I travel, I'll actually Airbnb my place so that when I leave, I'm getting paid instead of leaving your place and, already having paid the rent. So that's a great one. I actually interviewed a couple of guys that do Airbnb. They have a product on how to basically make money with Airbnb. Had them on my podcast as well. Okay,
cool. And so the places that you've been so far, what have been your favorites?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it just depends on what you're talking about. I'm actually interested in what you guys think too. I was going to ask you that, but for me, it's a lot of it is like uniqueness and just difference. Like I think the most different place that I've been to is maybe Cambodia, and I was so excited to be there because it was like they just had such a horrific history, and to see them now going in and having the free market kind of enter in, it's like everybody wants to work there. Everybody's super excited to have tourists. Everybody's like learning English, and it was really fun for me to be in Cambodia for a little bit because I had my own driver driving me around, and it just like I felt like I was living like a king, on just a few dollars a day, and so that was pretty exciting. I could name a lot of other places. Bali was amazing. I loved some of the places in Bali that I went to. Just amazing people and amazing just kind of feeling there, and
Bali seems like a digital nomad hub.
It kind of is, but at the same time, the internet there just sucks.
No, that's not good.
Yeah, it's like people try to make it work, and I think there's some new. It's getting a little bit better, and that was a couple of years ago when I was there. Yeah, unfortunately, like I tried to run my business from there, and it was so hard because every restaurant, coffee shop you go to, it says free Wi-Fi, and then you get in there and it doesn't work.
Oh yeah,
it's like
I hate that.
Yeah. But
so from all the people that you've talked to in your podcast, and so I thought that Bali was one. I haven't actually been, but I think like Berlin is another one. And there's all kinds of these little hubs that have the whatever you want to call digital nomads, lifestyle design entrepreneurs. What are some of the hubs that you've heard about?
Yeah, so I spent about a month in Chiang Mai, which is northern Thailand. Yeah, that's definitely a hub, and there's a lot of people from my Dynamite Circle group that are there, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's so great. The weather is really nice there, and it's really easy to live there. It's super cheap. The food is great. Internet is really solid, and there's a great community of kind of expats and people just doing all sorts of different businesses there. I would say, if somebody is starting a business and they are willing to travel and willing to live in other places, that's pretty ideal as far as I can see. The only downside is it's not super exciting. Like Chiang Mai itself, there's not a ton of really exciting things, but you can get to a lot of places from there. So I mean, that's a great spot. A lot of people go to Saigon as well. Saigon it's becoming a really hot spot for people from all over the world, and that's a great place too. I definitely couldn't see myself living there because the traffic and the pollution are just way too much for me. But it does have like that entrepreneurial spirit, and there's a lot of people that are like locals that are just doing things, and that's what I like to look for is places where people seem to be doing things and making exciting things happen. And then Saigon is definitely a place for that. But, it has a lot of those kind of elements of developing countries, which I can't stand, which is like the pollution and then the noise levels. Like it's way beyond my my tolerance level. So.
You're listening to the Borderless Podcast. Our guest today is Kevin Koskella. He is the host of the Freedom Lovin Podcast. It's a podcast that you would like if you like this one. And one of the things that you talk about quite a bit, or at least you were in the podcast I was listening to, and I only want to spend a little bit of time on this, is Bitcoin. Why don't you share with us? It seemed like you were just getting into it a couple of years ago, as I was, and Do you have any suggestions about practical ways that people can actually use Bitcoin today?
Yeah, practical ways. That's a really good question because it seems like Bitcoin has gotten to the point where everybody's heard of it now, and some people understand what it could do in the future, but what about the present? Like, what is going on? Like,
Right.
why is it not? People aren't using it on an everyday life. The one thing that I think is great about it is just being able to send money anywhere in the world in seconds, as much money as you want, with almost no fees. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is not offered in any other way. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I could see working really well. For me, like using Bitcoin, I use it for like grocery shopping sometimes. Like they have these apps. There's eGifter and there's Gift. Mm-hmm. Those are two mobile apps, and you can basically just buy a gift card with Bitcoin, and then it'll convert it to dollars, and then you could spend those gift cards at places like Whole Foods. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I use it. But as far as anything else, I mean, I think it's kind of one of those things where it's developing and people are figuring things out. And I think that the guy that I've listened to most about Bitcoin is Andreas Antonopoulos.
Right. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's a pretty amazing speaker. And he talks about how it's like, we're not going to see much of any change like in the US. We're not going to really see it go mainstream for a long time. But there's places in the world where they really need Bitcoin, like Argentina.
Yeah.
Yeah, places in Africa and stuff like that, where they're actually going to probably adopt it a lot quicker than you see in the Western world.
Mm-hmm. So if I want to say I've got some money in an account, or I've got some Bitcoin in my wallet, and I just want the cash, I have to go on a local exchange here in Mexico and find someone else who wants to buy it from me, meet them, and then transfer the Bitcoin to them, and they hand me the cash. Is that it?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, you can also go to Coinbase.com and you can register your bank account and do it that way. And then
but how do I get the pesos or the dollars wherever I am? I have a Coinbase account. That's how I purchase the Bitcoin. But now, what if I want cash?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing for that is to develop a network in your area of people that you can buy and sell Bitcoin with. And I have that. I mostly use my one friend here, but I've got other people too that I could go to and do either one, either buy or sell. So I think that's really the best way to do it, especially because you can pretty much do that anonymously. Like that's where if you're on Coinbase, it's not so anonymous because you have to register all your information.
Right.
But doing local Bitcoins or something like that, or just even having a network, it makes it a lot easier.
Okay, fantastic. So you've got another business that you refer to on your website. It comes up a lot. It's called Internet Business Mastery. Are you involved in that, or is that a friend of yours?
No, that's a friend. That's who I mentioned, Jeremy Franzen, who I've had on the show a couple times. Right. Yeah, it's just that that's kind of how I got started with this. One of the resources I used when I was first getting started, and up for a few years, and I still listen to their show. But they give so much great free information on their podcast. You could totally build a business just based on what they talk about on their podcast, and it's also it's entertaining and interesting, and so I really like their show.
Cool. All
right. Yeah, sounds good. There's a lot of information on your podcast for people that want to start their own business. You got some information on sales funnels and other types of things that very useful. So
it's Kevin Koskella, host of the Freedom Lovin Podcast. I'm enjoying it. It's now something I've subscribed to and I'm listening to, in addition to James Altucher here and there and the Borderless Podcast. He says freedom. He always asks the question, what does freedom mean to you? And so he told us it was 5 words: not having any unchosen obligations. I like it. I'll have to think about that. So we have a question too that we like to ask everybody, and James always asks it. James?
Yeah. So, Kevin, if you were talking to someone that wanted to get started with this entrepreneurial venture or living outside of their own borders, what would be the best piece of advice that you would give them?
I think I would basically I would say that the sky's the limit. Don't limit yourself. I think that's the base, the most helpful information I could think of is just don't limit yourself. Anything is possible. And I wrote that blog post recently on Mexico, and I think James, you read that. I had a experience with a taxi driver in Mexico City, and he was driving us actually to the Teotihuacan pyramids, and it's kind of, it's been like a 45-minute drive, and it's if anyone's ever driven in Mexico City, it's pretty crazy, and the taxi drivers are about the craziest I've ever seen. And so we're driving along, and this bus starts to come in and go directly towards us, like we're going into a head-on collision. The last second, he swerves around it, and he's laughing, and he goes, "Hey guys, it's Mexico. Anything is possible." So I just kept thinking about that. Anything is possible, and that's the feeling that you get kind of in Mexico, where it's in some ways it's a great free feeling. In other ways, maybe not so much when you're about to get killed in a traffic accident. But anyway, yeah, that's the idea, is that don't limit yourself. Anything is possible, and there's always a way. There's always a way to kind of to break through these obstacles that seem to be in your way.
Excellent advice. I love that. Kevin Koskella, host of the Freedom Lovin Podcast on the Borderless Podcast this week. Thanks so much for being on the program, Kevin.
Cheers, guys.
A lot of guests on the Borderless Podcast, but it was nice to find somebody who has a podcast that reminds us in many ways like our own.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a lot of good guests on there and a lot of good information. So
Kevin Koskella. So we encourage you to go over to his website. After you rate and review ours and subscribe to ours, go over to Freedom Lovin Podcast too, the Freedom Lovin Podcast, I believe he calls it, and subscribe to that one as well. And if you have any comments on anything that we talked about today, we invite your criticism or your praise. Go to borderlesspodcast.com, click on the Join Now button. What happens then, James?
Okay, yeah. So we've got a free ebook on there if you want to get started. If you're looking at some new places that you want to move or maybe travel to, I've got a kind of an ebook to lead you on some different online resources to use. And then along with that ebook is also a link to the Borderless Network group. It's a private group of people all over the world. So, get on there and introduce yourself, and you'll probably find some people in your area, and you'll continue to get these podcasts. So another thing I was going to say is, this with that. Was New Mexico LLC. Kevin said that he had a PDF that he would be willing to send people. So what I'll do is I'll put his email address in the show notes. And if you're interested in it, email him and he can send you a free PDF on that.
Cool. And by the way, this podcast ended up going a lot longer than we planned for it to. You don't know that yet, but James is going to put out a second podcast with the conversation that we had with Kevin Koskella after that. So check that out if you like. It should be interesting. It goes a little deeper into some of the things we don't usually get into. But anyway, another Borderless Podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.